Okie. It's a typical windy evening in southern Alberta, and I hope the wind doesn't interfere too much in the quality of this recording. But I wanted to go ahead and make it while everything is fresh in my mind. The last few days I've been putting a lot of thought into what is the purpose of life, of our life. And what prompted this was last Sunday, less than a week ago, a friend of mine passed away from cancer. He wasn't an old man. He was maybe 10, 12 years older than me. He has a teenage son that, he's left behind, and his wife. And he wasn't a really, really close friend. Like, we didn't hang out and that kind of a thing. But we had a mutual purpose, and we were colleagues in various projects. And in fact, we have a project going right now that's a book about Blackfoot repatriations. He and I were both involved for many years in bringing ceremonial items out of museum collections back to the communities and putting them back into ceremony. And he in fact was a curator at one of the largest museums in Alberta, and had a very prominent role in kind of advocating for and pushing forward repatriations here in Alberta. And he also helped the Blackfoot communities in some of the repatriations that were done in the United States. And I once asked him, what was his interest in helping Blackfoot people? Why did he start getting involved with the community? Because he's not from the community. And whatever it was so powerful, and so personal that he got choked up and he really couldn't talk about it. And in part I think it's because it's taboo too, because he's an academic, that in part he's not allowed to have that personal connection with communities that he does have in our case. Anyway, he passed away, and I've been thinking about him. And I've been thinking, to me, there seems to be, there's all kind of like legacy making going on. I mean, obviously his interest in helping our community was motivated by a sense of purpose, by a sense that he was doing something that was good or that was needed, would be beneficial. He had a sense of purpose, and he went forward with that purpose to try to bring those things out of museums so that ceremonies could be revitalized and renewed. And to me, each of those Blackfoot ceremonies that is revitalized and renewed through repatriations, they instill very important values that are in the participants that are just very rare today. Those values, you don't find them very often, because the majority culture, which is now the global culture, is really at war against the life system. It's really a short-term thinking culture that is only interested in selfish, immediate gratifications, and is willing to do anything it has to meet those gratifications. It has no sense of value for what is life. See, to me, life is very, very precious. And, I'm not like the Buddhists who believe that human life is the most precious. I'm not like that at all. To me, all of the living are engaged in a precious experience. An equally precious experience of being alive. And we're all in this boat together. We're not separate. This is a system we're all part of. And the majority culture is attacking that system. The majority culture says our immediate wants are more important than the lives of such and such plants and animals. Certainly they put human needs and wants above everything else, and I totally disagree with that, and I think it's leading us in the direction where the legacy of this culture, that even when you're outside, or even when you think you're outside of it, like myself, I don't consider myself a member of the culture that is attacking life, and yet I'm forced in some ways to participate in it. But that doesn't mean I have to believe in it. That doesn't mean I have to agree with it. But I am, in a sense, forced to participate with it in the same way that, say, a crow is forced to participate in it, because a crow is going to eat what's available, even if it comes from the global trade network. Anyway, this is what the majority are involved in. They're involved in being selfish and outright at war against the life system for short-term, usually monetary, financial interests. But then there are these little pockets of subcultures and or indigenous cultures where there are people striving to assist life, and they have a long-term vision where they're thinking about not about their most immediate financial benefit, but they're thinking about the many generations to come and even the life system as a whole. And what is our legacy going to be in that respect? And, you know, my friend, like myself, was one of these people that I consider to be on the side of life. He may not have even known the extent to which he's on the side of life. He may just have known that it was wrong to lock away the tools of a people's culture, like these ceremonial items, to lock them away in a museum where they can't be functional and can't be used. Maybe that's all he knew, I don't know. But in his life and in what he did to help unlock those, to me he did a very huge contribution to the life system, because within those ceremonies that those objects enable, within those ceremonies there are certain values and understandings, indigenous, sustainable, life perpetuating values that become embodied by the participants. And the ripples of that into the future, I think, can be tremendous, even though we're up against such a massive enemy in that global culture. So, you know, to me, his life, his work, had purposes probably far beyond what he'll ever know. And it reveals a lot of things. You know, for one of the things that it reveals most immediately to me is that it's silly to be concerned about your personal legacy. Because I'll tell you what, as a non-community member, my friend, his memory is in the community, I mean, it's going to be very short. A few generations maybe. Because of the book, maybe a little bit longer. But you know, just think about it. Think about who in the 1700s were doing really important things that have affected us today. Who do you know? And don't look at any books, don't look at the internet, just from your own knowledge, from your own memory. Who do you know from the 1700s that whose work and whose, you know, life purpose and such has affected your own life? You're probably not going to be able to name many, if any, people. And this, to me, says something. All of our egotistical interests in creating legacy where we ourselves are connected to the long-term effects of what we do is silly nonsense. We are not going to be remembered. None of us are going to be remembered. Even the most famous say that you were perceived as a god on earth. You're only going to be remembered a few thousand years at best. Even for, you know, the most famous non-gods, you might be remembered a couple of hundred years. Seeking to create a personal legacy is ridiculous nonsense, unless you are a short-term thinker, in which case you are part of the problem. Your life pursuits, if you've only got the short-term interest in mind, chances are you're part of that culture that is acting in war against the life system. And yeah, I mean, in one respect or another, we're all part of that. But there's some that are more actively part of that than others, and some that are resisting it, whose life purpose is in resistance to that. And in my mind, if you are not in resistance to that, then, you're not on the side of life. And I think our purpose here as living beings is to be part of the perpetuation of life. And so, how do you do that? Well, to me, you need to be thinking about, well, for one, you need to be being yourself, being what you are. And, for instance, we're supposed to be human beings, and what does that mean? A human being is a kind of animal, and we have all these capacities. And in the context of this current culture, this anti-life culture, we are not living out a lot of those capacities. This is why we have to have things like working out, for instance, training physically, because we don't get it in our reality, in our everyday reality. It has to be a special thing that we do. And I see it in the birds that I've rescued, the birds with broken wings and stuff that I've rescued, who are living with me and who are now living in this domestic context. They'll make a special part of their day for working out. When in the wild, they wouldn't do that. In the wild, they'd just be living, and their workout is, their exercise, their physical health is going to come from their normal life. With us, it's not like that, because of the culture. So we're not being human beings, and in many, many ways we're not being human beings. For instance, most of us are not subsisting off of the natural abundance of our region. We are subsisting off of a global trade network. So unlike all the other animals who can just live off the natural abundance, we ourselves have created this situation where we're basically, there's a famine condition everywhere you go, because the population is so huge and the natural resources have been so depleted that we now have to subsist off what is grown through industrial agriculture and such on a global scale. And that, to me, that's no good. That is not being human. So, for me, first of all, we need to get back to being human. And how do we do that? We need to try at the personal and family level and such, try to get back to food sovereignty. At the very least, subsisting off of the local natural abundance. We need to, in any way that we can, without jeopardizing our health, our well-being, we need to withdraw our participation in that culture that's attacking life. And in terms of our bodies, we need to practice all kinds of human movement. We need to look at practicing really fundamental stuff like running. We need to run, we need to swim, we need to do martial arts, we need to do gymnastics in an applied way in our environment, not in a special gym, but in our environment. We need to learn to move again as human beings, because we've lost that. A lot of the things that we're doing in the long run are perpetuating and increasing the weakness of our species. One of the examples that I use a lot is the eyeglasses or corrective lenses. I'm wearing contact lenses right now. Whoever created this technology, again, I don't know. In my memory, I don't know. They did a world-changing thing for humans, at least. And are they remembered for it? Maybe if you go look it up. But the average person has no idea who created corrective lenses. I don't even know if it's out there to look up. But anyway, what goes on with corrective lenses is it's a short-term benefit for the person that has bad eyesight. They get their eyesight corrected. But what does it do in the long term for the future generations is it allows the person with the bad eyesight to live a more normal life, a longer life, to have more children and to perpetuate those weak genes into future generations, such that now when you look around, I'd say a good percentage of the population has poor eyesight, and it's going to get worse. Maybe someday everybody's going to be blind. You could be born blind and have to have a surgery right away when you're born just to give you eyesight. This is a possibility, and it's because we are allowing ourselves short-term comforts that are in a way they're selfish. And I think they're selfish, and why I say that they're selfish is because, again, life is precious. And we have had our turn living. And when we take actions that are not considerate of the life opportunities of future generations, then to me we're not fulfilling our purpose. We are part of that anti-life. We should be striving to fit in more ecologically, to become like a keystone species in the ecology. We should be striving to carry out our lives in ways that, in the long run, our great-great-great-grandchildren will be born with greater physical capabilities, not lesser, not weaker, as we are right now. You know, the things that we're doing right now, our future generations are inheriting weaknesses and becoming weaker and weaker and more dependent on the technologies of the life-killing culture. So I don't know if any of that makes sense. But, you know, that's the kind of stuff I've been thinking about the last few days with my friend. Because he's not going to be remembered. Just like none of us are, in the long run, going to be remembered. But he was a very humble guy. And you know, his memory's going to fade from the community even faster. But the things that he did were so, you know, so on the side of life that it's going to have a very lasting effect. And I think that's the kind of person that myself that I would like strive to be, is someone who's working on the side of life and forget about the ego boosting, forget about being remembered, forget about all of that. In the long run, no matter what, you're going to be an anonymous soldier. And are you going to be a soldier on the side of life, or are you going to be a soldier who's warring against life? That's what it comes down to. What's your purpose?